Hi, my name's Glenn Nano, and I am not an expert on any of this. Just full disclosure, we're being recorded for future reference and to scale the great expertise and context that's being shared here. Just to set the table, I and Paul Lakota and some other folks affiliated with the Harvard Club just thought that it would be useful to put experts and resources together with those who are in deep need around post-wildfire recovery, rebuild, um, and the challenges that come with that. And so with that, we have been connected to incredible people like Todd Nahara, who's an alumni and member of the club, going through it, unfortunately, with the loss of a home, who has then in turn met Mike Yurochko, who was burned in the Kincade Fire and has now begun building what was a not-for-profit, but now startup around post-recovery software, but also resources and expertise. So, and I'm going to tee him up to tee up Neil and Brad. So this is event 2 of 3. We're calling it Path to Recovery. Today's mostly going to be focused around the rebuilding team, money and goals, and the team itself. So I want to hand it off to, we're really excited to have our experts. I'm going to hand it off to Mike Yurochko of Loti to introduce Brad and Neil from Ready Home Builders. And we're so glad to have you. Just some order of business. If you have questions or comments, please put them in the chat. And we'll try our best to, at the end of each section, there'll be 3 big sections today. Todd, as our resident, both budding expert, but also going through it as a survivor, will moderate those questions for us. Okay, handing it off to Mike, and thanks so much again.
Oh, no, thanks, Glenn. Yeah, so as Glenn mentioned, so again, Mike Yurochko, and just short, so CEO, founder of Loti. I'm a former victim from the Kincade Fire, as Glenn mentioned, and our company is based on a lot of those learnings that basically I went through just like you're going through. I had a longer-winded introduction in sort of part 1 in this series, so just the short version of Loti is it's a recovery platform. Essentially, we have hundreds of free articles for you and free content, glossary terms, all sorts of stuff. If you go to loti.com, Loti, 100% free. There are articles around construction and personal property and insurance and finance and SBA and all these things that get fired out at you. Hundreds of articles. So, and it's totally free. We're building a tech platform. It's not ready yet. Sorry. And we also have a number of licensed public adjusters on staff that are happy to answer questions. You call in, obviously for hire as well, but we have a number of public adjusters that can help you through stuff. So that's the my quick intro. So last week or last time, more or less kind of ran point on a bunch of different things. This week, this is going to be a little bit more around Brad and Neil because of the topic at hand. At a high level, we're going to be talking a lot about construction. I met Brad and Neil because they were the folks that rebuilt my home. As I said, I was burned in 2019. We were also vandalized and looted, so it wasn't a total loss. So we had multiple partial losses and multiple burns on. It was a mess. I met Brad and Neil through that, and we've become very close friends. So I trust these guys. Basically, as I was saying off the phone or off air, I would trust them with like my kids. And I think like when you kind of go through this process, having an understanding from a knowledge standpoint of understanding this process, that's what we're trying to kind of educate through all this whole series. I think it's also really important to trust the people that you work with, and that's why I think Brad and Neil are great folks to have here. You're going to see very quickly that they're exceptionally experienced. So in short, and I'll kind of tee them up a little bit I'm going to bring them into the conversation later, but just kind of who they are. If you go to readyhomebuilders.com, you'll see that these guys have rebuilt hundreds of homes across Sonoma County and Napa County in the 2017, 18, 19 fires, again, including mine. So like whole neighborhoods, whole communities. They hosted meetings just like this to help those communities through the whole process. And we're rebuilding like dozens of homes at a time, kind of a thing. And they could speak about hundreds of homes in total, substantial help to the community. So there's a bit of a difference that they'll explain between kind of like a general contractor that's used to doing a kitchen remodel and then the skills that are required as a general contractor or a builder to kind of work in this environment. the rebuilding environment. When you're getting into this, we've got 12,000 homes that have been destroyed. That's a lot of damage. And so some of the themes that we talked about in the previous week of demand surge and how that really impacts your personal builds and your community builds, and some tools around working together as a community. These guys are very, very well versed in that. They're also very well versed in working with your insurance company, which is a big piece of this, right? Like that's kind of where a lot of the money is going to be coming from. And so these guys really know that. So just to review, and I'll kind of, I don't know, why not, Neil, Brad, is there anything, why don't I tee you up real quick and then come back in and give a quick review? Maybe just so they can hear your voice and do a mic check kind of a deal. Quick intro on yourselves.
Hello, everybody. Brad Welch, RHB Builders, Ready Home Builders. Live in Santa Rosa, California. Our community, as most of you probably are aware, went through the Cubs fire in 2017, and we helped a lot of people restore their lives. So we think we have some valuable experiences to share. So thanks for having us.
I'm Neil Bailey from RHB. Like my partner Brad said, we've personally been through this, lost homes, lost our kids' schools. So we understand where you're at and where your community is at right now. And like my partner said, we built hundreds of custom homes to try to get people back on track. And so hopefully we can share that knowledge with you guys, and hopefully it helps you out right now.
Thanks, guys. So just really quickly, like what we went through in the previous session. So if you didn't have a chance to join that, we are going to pull in some of those themes over here because this is sort of like this is number 2 of 3. So we try to have themes that kind of are threads throughout some of these conversations. So just in review, the last time we talked, we went through a decision framework, which is important to kind of get your head around. It had 3 major parts to it, which knowledge is power. So reading, as I mentioned earlier, tons of free content online. So please use that. It's totally free. It will help. We can't cover everything in 90 minutes, right? So knowledge is power. Number 2, time is a big piece of this. Being able to make informed decisions in a relatively timely manner is important. That's because of demand surge. Demand surge is coming. There's, again, deep dive in the previous thing. And number 3, also then working together as a community. There are economies of scale. There's economies of power when you work together. There's knowledge sharing. There's all sorts of tips throughout the entire process when you work together that can help folks. So that's a decision framework. We applied a lot of those learnings to debris removal. We went into some partial loss stuff. We went through some different finances and fraud, mortgages, loans, and grants. And then we had a whole insurance corner trying to give you some tips on how to think through insurance. I don't know if you recall like a fairy tale about a big jolly green giant ripping out your house. Anyways, it's a way to think about insurance. And then some of the things around depreciation and public adjusters, what are those? So that's what we did last time. This week, a little bit different. We're switching more, if that's more of the foundation of stuff, this is now we're shifting into really rebuilding and getting some of those tools together for us to rebuild. So tonight we're going to do 3 primary topics. The first, we're going to actually just kind of start at the beginning where we think everybody kind of is, which is more or less going through your goals as a homeowner. And really, and what does that mean? Like we are where we are, right? So we've lost our home and we now need to rebuild. And what exactly is it that we want to rebuild? Are we rebuilding a family home, custom homes? Are we working from home? Are we retiring? Do we want to do this quickly? Do we want to have more time? There's a variety of things to sort of think through in there. And I think, and Brad and Neil are going to walk us through just sort of their experience through, again, working with hundreds of homeowners, kind of what some of their goals were and tips to kind of think through. The second thing we're going to get into then is sort of your team members. And we'll touch briefly on architects, but really this is going to be around understanding the team that a contractor or builder has, like actually a rebuilding team where you're going to spend 95% of your insurance money off of A and B. And kind of what are all those folks? What do they do? What do the contractors do? How are they really managing schedules and materials and labor forces, especially in an environment like this? It takes a special skill. And so sort of hear it directly from the horse's mouth and horses, but you get my idea. And then lastly, to kind of wrap it up, I'm going to sort of blend some insurance corner in with some finances, and we're going to get into some money based topics. So basically, just some budgets, like how would you think through a budget? How do you deal with a money flow that actually like how does the money actually get through your own system that you're going to be building? And also accounting skills that you're gonna need. You need to track some of this information through when it comes from insurance. You're going to need to basically go get more money from insurance, et cetera. So we're going to talk about essentially those things: budget, accounting, and money flow. So that's kind of how the evening sort of sets up. I hope that kind of makes sense from an intros and kind of what we did before and what we're doing tonight. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to just kind of hand over the mic, since we know that it's working, to Brad and Neil, and kind of walk us through homeowner just goals. Everybody here, they're kind of, let's assume that lots are getting cleared, right? FEMA is kind of coming through. Obviously, you guys are also doing some private debris in the area, but some other folks might have some private, but largely I think FEMA is coming through. Lots are starting to get cleared, and people are starting to think, okay, now what do I need to do? What are some of the next steps? How do I think through my goals? What do I need as a family? So I'll kind of hand it over to you guys.
All right, so again, Neil Bailey here. And homeowner goals, I think it's obviously the very first thing you have to think about. And, the questions you've got to ask yourself is this our forever home? And that depends on your age, what your family dynamic is right now. There's multiple things that go into that end of it. And then, or is this our transition home? Are our kids 15 or 16 and they're going off to college soon and we plan on selling this house and moving on somewhere else? So then do we have to design that house with that in mind for resale value? Or is this maybe we're more advanced in life and we just don't, for one reason or another, don't have the stomach or the want to rebuild in that neighborhood? So do we sell our lot? Do we build a spec home? Do we would design something to try to pull every dime we could out of that project and move on to somewhere else? Or do we take the insurance money and build or buy something completely somewhere else and sell our lot? So those are the questions I think. Number one, you have to answer before we can move on to, the next phases of these projects. And, a lot of that's going to come down to your insurance and your, obviously, which then leads into your budget and what you can afford and what you can't afford and what you really want to do and what you want to do moving forward. That's going to be the benefit of your family and for yourself.
I think in summary, although it's a tragic situation, it can be a tremendous opportunity as well. And that's the approach. We think it's the clients that we worked with that had the most success really put a lot of thought and discussion into what they wanted to create and make lemonade out of lemons. It's a tremendous opportunity. It's a brand new home, new design. In some cases that was some clients' goals. Other clients emotionally wanted exactly what was lost. And that's great too. Like they loved the homes they were in and wanted to recreate them exactly how they were. So
Right.
And I think like just sort of double clicking, it's not necessarily making a bigger home. That's not the implication here, right? Like if there's a 2,000 square foot home, the context here is that we still want to try to at least begin with rebuilding a 2,000 square foot home as well, right? But the goals around that home can be pretty different. For example, if you've got young kids and a 3-2, like a 3.5 house, two of those bedrooms might open up into a Jack and Jill. It's still the same cost from an insurance standpoint. It's still the same budget, but it's obviously pretty different because that's for like a young family. Or if we're, Glenn, for instance, who's remote working, tech, Netflix guy, it's like, hey, maybe that bedroom shouldn't be a Jack and Jill kind of a thing. Maybe we'll want to build a dedicated office. Again, sort of like same footprint, same pricing from an insurance standpoint, but a very different way to kind of think about your layouts, right? And then beginning to then think about indoor, outdoor, and those types of deals, how that all sort of fits together. I think those are all pretty important. Other aspects that may be important to you is, especially in this environment, is understanding things like hardening your home. What does that mean when you get into sort of roof choices, right? So do you want to have a metal roof, for instance, that's basically fire resistant? I wouldn't call anything fireproof, but certainly fire resistant, right? Is that something that is sort of on the board, if you will, from something around something that you want to, that calculus that you want to evaluate, right? Of keeping your home safe. There's certain things that you're going to have to do, like fire sprinklers, but having something that's sort of fire resistant, using fire resistant materials outside that may or may not, it might be a little bit extra from a budget standpoint, but it could be very, very important from a goal standpoint. And so like hardening your home, like those types of tools, when you pick out like your architect, for instance, do they have experience with those concepts, right? I think that's really important to understand of that. That's what we mean by goals, right? Is sort of the forever home or the family home, or is it a kind of a practical sort of like office sort of type of a home, or those things, right? Or do we need to build in accessibility from a safety standpoint, right? So
Multiple generations for sure.
wheelchair ramps, are we talking about like a a one-story place? Is like that sort of a 2 stories is kind of a non-starter. We need to go with a one-story place. And understanding some of those goals, so accessibility is easy, and with maybe wider showers. Wider shower isn't more expensive as long as it's planned in place, it's fine, right? It's like having that ability to kind of get in and out, and accessibility, safety, that type of thing. Again, it really depends, right? A Jack and Jill bathroom and sort of an accessibility unit, those are two very different concepts, but they would still sit in the same footprint. They're still basically, from an insurance standpoint, they're going to fall under the same umbrella, but they're very, very different points of view and how to design a home. And that's kind of what we mean by kind of capturing together homeowner goals. I hope that kind of makes sense.
And if I can interject, overall theme in the design, do you want a craftsman home or something like a Tuscan villa or more contemporary or modern? All those are really important early on in
Yeah.
your decisions.
Yeah, and I'll guarantee that unless you just bought your house, 6 months, a year ago, your life has changed from when you bought that house to now, and so your goals have changed. Maybe you had a 2-story house and you had 2 or 3 kids living there, and your kids are gone and grown, and you don't need a 2-story house, nor do you want one. Like Mike was saying, maybe you go with a 1-story, 2,000 square foot house that has 36-inch wide doors, and you're thinking ahead. So that is your forever home, and you can live in place. So there's all these different transitions in your life, and now you have that opportunity. All the things you didn't like about your house or your yard, now's in a way is like you said, is kind of an exciting time, because you get to recreate or improve upon what you had before.
And I would say just even double clicking on that, right? And using it as an example to make sure that one of the themes I want to come back to consistently throughout the evening is involving your contractor or builder as early as possible. And it's because of some of these decisions, some of the things we're talking about right now are really going to impact your budget. And your budget is driven, which we'll talk about more towards the end, really driven around insurance, right? So like, as Neil was saying, like what type of architectural even feel are you looking for, right? So a craftsman is sort of one way to build a 2,000 square foot house. An Italian villa is another way. On paper, maybe they look like they're both 2,000 square foot houses, but if that Italian villa has a bunch of big river rock that's installed on the side and it's got hand stucco on the outside, where your craftsman is just basically made in a little bit more of a streamlined way, right? We'll call it sticks, but using shingles or using siding and sort of materials that are a lot less expensive, that's a pretty different way to use your budget, is just on architecture, right? And I'm not saying Italian villas are great. but understand like really early on when you're working with your architect around some of the goals you may have as a homeowner, that a lot of those goals are going to have associated costs. And so some of those things can actually quote really impact your end budget. Your insurance company doesn't honestly care if it's a Craftsman or an Italian villa. They're not like looking at your plans, they care about the money. And so it's making sure that you're making informed decisions on things like that, where your architect and your contractor are working hand in hand, and that your contractor has a working understanding of like what is the budget that is kind of coming through from an insurance standpoint. Folks that have worked with a number of different insurance policies and understand well beyond the fairy tale that we talked about last time, around coverages A and B, but can then really roll up the sleeves and understand ordinance coverage, understand your landscaping coverage, understand extended replacement costs. Like there's a lot of things that go into that insurance policy. And so working with a contractor hand in hand with your architect up front is going to have a massive, massive impact on your budget. Like what you don't want to do is design, hey, I've got this 3,000 square foot Italian villa. This thing is going to be great. When your wife and I, we're all in, this is going to be phenomenal. And then the architect that hands it over to the contractors, and all of a sudden you're over budget by $500,000 just to even before you even get started. Like that's a real downer for everybody.
Very, very important point. We did have some clients that ran down that path, what I call in a vacuum. Emotionally fell in love with a certain design, but they did not one, the architect did not reel in or ask questions about budget, and nor did those clients engage a builder or the builder community early on in the process. So Mike, very important point. As you establish what your goals are, and then we'll jump into the design team. But once you're talking with architects and stuff, you need to very clearly communicate what your insurance limits are, what your budgets are, what your resources are to rebuild, because that can impact the design very much so.
Yeah, I mean, just even more specific examples of how it can kind of build off on itself, right? Then the Italian villa might have wood windows, right? You get into wood windows versus an aluminum clad window, you're talking very different. That could be twice as much. And so it kind of builds on itself in terms of the materials and, oh, I need the wide plank flooring and just all the different things that happen to achieve certain architectural goals, even if they're both 2,000 square foot homes, can really kind of get you into some pretty fast trouble. And so I think that like understanding what maybe that's one of the goals, by the way. So I'm not saying that it's wrong to go build the Italian villa again. Like believe me, I get it. But you can get yourself into water or hot water. And that's why like really understanding what those goals are: accessibility, small families, work from home. You need high network or like high network bandwidth types of things in home, whatever it is, you're the entertainment industry, whatever the case may be, like making sure that those goals are there. Architecture could be one of them. Maybe you're a designer by trade. So that's fine too. But and then working with the architect and contractor hand in hand. Glenn's tap.
Yeah, no, I'm good. If I could just jump in, and I'm using the paradigm, Mike, you've outlined for what Loti will be when you launch, which is sort of like a TurboTax UI. So my question to all three of you and for the group is, I imagine there's a lot of I don't know what I don't know in terms of goals. So that's why I think it's so valuable that you've already introduced. Like, are there websites or resources or PDFs that one can buy, download, that sort of give a prompt, like, how much do you care about natural light? Do you want a Japanese garden? How many bedrooms do you want? And are you sure you're going to want them 10 years from now? Sort of like TurboTax does, that sort of helps you even think of the questions you wouldn't ask? Or is that something you have to sort of start with your building team and architect? If you guys could all speak to like how the folks in this room are going to even start to ask those questions of themselves.
I mean, I'm just real quick. I'll let Brad and Neil rest on it for a second. I mean, it was neat, honestly, that you kind of jumped to a productization of the problem. It's a good call by you. I would say in general, from a Loti standpoint, no, we don't have like a wizard that sort of would do something like that. But there's, just to use an example, there's books on Amazon that we have published. This one's on construction, and those books are a subset of all of that material that's up online. So I think to your point, like there is a bit of upfront work here as a homeowner. You really do need to understand some high level concepts around the most expensive pieces of your property, right? So like roofs are really important. There's probably half a dozen articles on roofs. Understanding windows and really getting like most people might understand what a single hung window is, but kind of a tilt and turn sort of a thing. And I'm not going to like throw too many examples out there, but it's a lot different, right? And having a wood window versus an aluminum clad window, we're talking very, very different in terms of cost. And all that information actually is up on Loti. There's not necessarily pricing per se, but at least gives you an idea of some of the things you're going to have to kind of walk through. And we can use plumbing fixtures and like we can go through all these things, right? And I think the other aspect too is that you don't have to necessarily know everything up front, but you at least have to be willing to learn. We are talking to the Harvard crowd here, right? So this crew can absorb some serious information. And I'd say like, and it's okay. You don't have to be an expert, right? But you should certainly know some of the broad strokes of the things you're going to get involved in. That way you can properly direct your architect and you properly direct your contractor. They're on your team. You know, you're paying them. You want them to do what's right for you, but giving them the right direction so everybody isn't spinning around. So I would definitely look at loti.com on the learn button. I don't make any money off of it. It's all free content. So like, please go up there and use it to your advantage. I don't know, Brad, Neil, how you want that, but
Thanks, Mike. In our experience, again, back to goals, like the general theme of the house is the starting point, and then, you know, the design professionals, really part of their job from my perspective is to help identify those elements, and then it's important for you to manage some of those decisions and ask questions about cost. There is a lot that goes into a home. When I say a lot of decisions to make. And we did one neighborhood. I actually lost a rental property in the Tubbs fire, and I started jumping in and dealing with my insurance. It was on site, and we did our own private cleanup, and neighbors started coming out and asking questions. What are you doing? I said, well, we're going to rebuild. And so that snowballed in a neighborhood into us doing 29 homes, pretty contiguous lots in that one neighborhood. And similar to these meetings for 9 months, we met pretty continuously. I wouldn't say every weekend, but sometimes every other weekend. Different topics of discussion and design elements in the house came up, and we had a saying, because a lot of people get overwhelmed, and we had a saying, how do you eat an elephant? Like one bite at a time. So your design professionals help, and what we did is we created some tools to help homeowners organize their thoughts, and those tools were broken down per room. And it basically would take the family room, for example, and identify each selection that the homeowner needed to make. And then you jump to, you know, primary bedroom, primary bathroom. And people found that very useful because you can compartmentalize stuff and not get overwhelmed, because it can be daunting when you say, oh my gosh, I got to make 200 decisions and I need to make them next week. And so it's a helpful tool, and we're happy to share some of those tools, Glenn, or Mike. I can email them to you guys and you can put them up or post them or whatever. So
That'd be
Okay,
awesome.
we're about ready to jump to the next section, but before we do, just want to see if there's any questions that you all have.
nailed it.
Covered it all.
Fair enough. I kind of want to get my hands on that, by the way, Brad. I know we did a full custom build, but I'd love to sort of see your
Yeah.
stuff. All right, so then the next topic of the evening then is really diving deep on the responsibilities of just sort of the team. And I'd say, like, you know, Brad, if you could just sort of speak to some of the property basics of like, what is a geotech, what is a surveyor, right? And like, and kind of what the architects team is. I believe that this community has already had an architect speak in these forums before, but
okay.
so maybe just spend 90 seconds just to sort of show like, hey, this is what the architects can do, and this is all the folks that you guys kind of manage. And then if you can kind of then walk through your overall responsibilities, how you think about project planning and management, scopes of work, and then all the different subs that you have to manage, and kind of even go even chronologically, right? Like the different folks that you have to kind of pull in. So folks can kind of get a working understanding of what is mechanical, right? Like what are all these words that are going to get thrown at them without being too confusing, but you got to get some broad strokes of what a contractor does.
So, high level, I mean, it may be obvious, but the goal of the design team is to help put together plans and specifications that will be submitted to the jurisdiction who's going to issue a building permit so you can then rebuild your home. So that's the overall goal. So that team includes, we've talked about architects. You had they're the design professional that you're going to work closely with on a lot of the selections that Mike talked about. Part of the architect he will manage then the other sub consultants that are part of the design team. So a geotechnical soils engineer will be on board, and they come out and they excavate soil pits, and they do soil profiling to identify the soil indices that then in turn help the structural engineer design the appropriate foundation. So there's two parts: the geotech soils engineer, and then a structural engineer is typically part of the architectural team as well. Prior to that happening, the architect needs basically a site plan. So they'll subcontract with the surveyor typically. Well, they'll sometimes design professionals. It really depends on the specifics of the property. Architects can create a site map from an assessor's parcel map that has meets and bounds and legal descriptions, and then they can, digitize that in AutoCAD. If it's a relatively flat lot without any slopes, where drainage isn't a consideration or anything like that. So drainage again is a big point. So another part of the team will be a civil engineer, and the civil engineer will do a part of your design, or part of your submittal package will be a grading and drainage plan. So if you have slope considerations, elevation differences between adjacent or adjoining properties, all those things are taken into consideration into the design. And the architect then assembles that whole package into what we call a submittal set, and that's the plan submittal to the appropriate jurisdiction. In California, we have energy considerations. So there's part of the building code that is called Title 24, which has to do with all the energy efficiencies that are involved in your home. It takes into consideration reflective properties of windows and roofing. Sometimes considers siding materials can be calculated. Insulation. The heating and cooling system, which is referred to as HVAC, or heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. And what am I forgetting?
Plumbing.
Insulation.
Oh, yeah, plumbing as well. So low flow water fixtures are a big consideration and part of that. And tied into Title 24 is Cal Green, where there's other requirements in Cal Green where we document every material that's used in the building of your home, the MSDS sheets, the technical capabilities of flooring and paint, and the caulking and grouts and tile components, or stone countertop components, anything like that are documented into a Cal Green requirement. And then also our debris disposal during construction. A large percentage of our what we call C&D, construction debris, needs to be recycled, and so things are sorted. There's collection stations that do sorting for us, which makes our job easier sometimes. But they give us reports to say they're recycling 80% of the materials, and then giving us reports that we can include in the Cal Green. So again, the architect will typically take the lead and facilitate. He's the quarterback, right? So, and then you have the geotech soils engineer, the surveyor, the civil engineer, structural engineer, Title 24 Cal Green consultants, and the architect assembles all of their into a plan that gets submitted. So, anything I missed, Mr. Yurochko?
I mean, there is some one-offs on things. There might be some folks with septic systems. I'm not sure, like exactly in here, but sometimes there are. So you want
Yeah.
septic, solar. You want to talk about a couple of those things real quick?
So our experience, I don't know if you want to, I mean, our experience with septic systems is the jurisdiction will require some sort of site investigation on whether that system maintained its integrity through the fire. So typically civil engineers qualified to do that work where they come out, they'll pull the lids on the septic tank, make sure the pipes aren't burned up, make sure the tanks maintain its integrity. Very important too, during debris removal, especially if FEMA subcontractors are on sites, that homeowners go out and clearly mark and identify where tanks and leach fields are, so no damage occurs during debris removal. Very, very important. We saw some horror stories where some inconsiderate FEMA subcontractors actually did more damage than good to septic systems. So very good point.
Yeah, I mean, your ordinance coverage can cover an extended leach field, but replacing a whole thing could get to a real problem real quick.
Yeah.
So in general, so if that's our kind of our architect team, you want to walk us through sort of your teams and sort of give folks like a high level understanding of some of like the exterior trades, sort of like your underground work and concrete guys, or you
Go
go bottoms up, top down, however you want to do it, like underground to concrete and
Sure.
foundation.
So again, the quarterback analogy, Neil and I, as general contractors, manage not only a large team of our own employees, but we also manage subcontractors.
Yeah. So kind of an A to Z, everything starts typically, especially with an area that was built out, you know, the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. We'd probably start with the survey. The surveyor would come out, mark the corners to make sure that we're on the right property.
There
And-
were some, not us, but there were some other contractors that actually poured foundations on the wrong lots because it can be quite chaotic.
Yeah, or over the property line, so you had 2 feet of a foundation on somebody else's property. So surveyors, kind of a cheap insurance. But anyway, start with the survey crew to come out, mark the elevations, the heights of the property in the corners, and then we'd bring in our general engineer, our dirt, what we call our dirt contractor, who brings out the big tractors and starts cleaning the lot or grubbing it, we call it, because once it's been cleaned by FEMA or your private contractor, the weeds and the flowers are going to come back quickly. So that material has to be scarified. And then per the geotech's recommendation, he's going to have a compaction level that he's going to need to bring that site to, so we can put the foundation in. So he's going to do that preliminary work.
Can we expand on that for a minute?
Sure, absolutely.
So part of your design team, the geotech is going to identify the soils, and Neil brought up foundation. Sorry to interrupt you, but so there's, based on the soil types and slopes, the design professionals will design the appropriate foundation. There's 4, 5, 6 different types of foundation. A standard spread footing is a traditional raised floor where you have a concrete perimeter with wood floor joists. A slab foundation is basically a concrete pad, like most garages are concrete pads. There's structural slabs, mat slabs, post-tension slabs, and all that is dependent again upon the expansiveness of the soil or any slope considerations. And then pier and grade beam is a pretty common foundation on sites that have slope considerations, to where we drill piers anywhere from 6 to 10 inches in diameter, and anywhere very common they're 8 to 12 feet deep.
Depending on the soil.
Again, depending on depth of soil, the goal is to get into something solid. So there have been cases where the caisson piers are 20 plus feet deep. So again, that's all site consideration, but that's important about foundation. So when Neil talks about the dirt guy coming in to prepare the site for the foundation, each lot has its own specifics that really determine how that occurs.
Yeah, so in a typical slab, you'll see quite a bit that the geotechnical engineer wants you to dig out 3 feet deep, remove all that dirt, water condition it, put it back into place, and compact it to 95% compaction rate. And then, if depending on the type of house you're building, you'd move into either, if you had a slab, you'd have your plumbing come in and do the under slab plumbing. Foundation crew would set up the rest of the foundation and get that poured out. So, and then A to Z, then we'd be moving on to your framing contractor, underfloor insulation, depending on the type of year. If you have a raised floor, underfloor plumbing, we're moving up through, and then frame out the entire house, sheet it, close it in, and you get into your roofing contractors, your electrical, HVAC. The plumbing keeps moving up through the house as we're progressing. Windows, doors, we try to waterproof the exterior of the home as quickly as possible, so we can have the electrical contractor come in and do his work, because obviously we don't want the electrical getting wet. Moving through that, then we'd be getting into, like I said, your windows and doors, siding, and then moving back into drywall and interior finishes, cabinets, tile.
So one thing to add too is California building code on all residential projects requires interior fire sprinklers. There was kind of a misunderstanding of interior fire sprinklers. Their intent is not to stop wildfires. So it's if there's a candle fire or Christmas tree lights, whatever.
Kitchen fire, typically.
Yeah. So we, in consideration of hardening, like Mike talked about, we have designed and built exterior sprinkler systems. We've run water lines up to roofs with exterior sprinklers and things with valves. So if God forbid another wildfire would occur in the future, that you'd be able to water down or wet down the outside of the house. I know.
Well, and I did see that CAL FIRE came out with their new fire map, and it's labeled your area a high risk area, so you are going to be in what we call WUI, or wildland urban interface, and that's going to add extra hardening to your house. That's going to be regulated by the government. They're gonna regulate.
Required, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be required.
So WUI is part of the California Building Code. Has to deal with hardening and fire protection. So some of the materials, roofing, a slate composite roof, which is a normal comp roof that you see on a majority of houses, is WUI compliant. Tile and metal also comply. Siding materials, cement fiberboard is a very common product that's being used and applied now for hardening. Hardy, HARDIE, is a manufacturer, vendor who has a lot of products out there. Stucco does comply, but things like old T111 siding and some redwood siding, or we had some people in some rural areas that had some beautiful rustic barns or cabins that were turned into primary residences over the years, and they weren't, because of WUI requirements, they weren't allowed to go back with some of those materials.
And just to interject just really quickly, well,
Please.
number one, I love Hardy Hardy's great. But I would say that when you start getting into those types of things, working with a contractor and a builder they understand not just like building codes. Like if you're working with a contractor that doesn't understand building codes, like get another contractor. But beyond that, also in understanding like how that can actually be billed back to your insurance company and understanding ordinance coverage, ordinance and code coverage, working usually with a public adjuster, but basically there is, as we kind of talked about in the previous session, there's the primary coverages, but then there's those mini coverages, endorsements or riders, right? One of which is ordinance law. And folks that have worked with insurance companies before can then help extract some of those costs and not have that be part of your, call it A plus B budget, extract those out and sort of invoice them separately, because they're not necessarily seen as upgrades, they're seen as code upgrades, right? So it's not like these aren't like luxury things. You have to do some of these things, and you can you can basically get reimbursed from insurance separately. And so it's kind of important where these guys are talking about codes, they also really understand insurance and how your insurance policies are structured. And that's a really important sort of thread to kind of keep double clicking on, because a lot of that stuff is you have to do, but it can be covered by ordinance code coverage.
So just big picture on ordinance code, my understanding of it is, say your house was built in the 80s, California building codes have changed and been upgraded. So any design aspect of that home that meets the current code requirements, a portion of that home design could fall under the code upgrade money. So it's
That's right. Yeah.
okay.
That's right. And it's sort of, I would say even later than the 80s, it really, that kind of like the big switch over was 2008. A lot of
Right.
these ones are going to be from the 50s, 60s, 70s, but yeah, if you had an older home in any of those eras, there should be some opportunities to extract some of these costs using folks that have done this a lot of times. So
So, and if I could circle back on one thing, the most important part of your team members and your design team is once you're working with an architect and you've expressed to them what your goals are, from our perspective, and not a sales pitch by any means, but it's really important to engage a building professional as part of your team, because they'll fact check and backstop some of the architect's assumptions on cost, and that's a really important takeaway from today.
yeah, super important.
Yeah,
Actually-
and not only that, the architect's not a builder. I mean, and what I like to say is they build the pretty picture. They take that pretty picture, they send it to the structural engineer, and he actually builds the bones of the house and how it's actually going to be structured, what kind of beams and post and support that's going to be needed in that. And if you've already got a builder in mind, or you have one on contract already, the things like myself and Brad do, we'll take those plans before they're even done and we'll send them to our HVAC provider. And he'll look at them, he'll say, this is a great looking house, but there's absolutely nowhere for the ducting. So before we get into an issue where we've got the house, framed out, and now
Where someone's not going to be happy when we have to steal half their closet so we can run our ducts
Put in
through.
a 12-inch duct, right? Yeah.
right. So those are all those things that having a team in place when you start the actual design of this home is gonna bring to fruition what you actually had in mind. That was your vision. You're gonna actually end up with that, hopefully, instead of, like Brad said, we have to cut half of your closet to bring the ducting through because the architect didn't have enough or didn't put it in the right place. So having your
Yeah.
team, like Brad said, having a builder on board and guys like us who not only built, over 100 plus, hundreds of fire burn houses, that wasn't a subdivision. These were all custom homes with, different individuals, different goals, different needs, and different architects, different structural engineers. And we've seen some really good ones and some really bad ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you guys kind of like double clicking on that a little bit, right? So I think it's really important to unpack that further, right? Like it's a really unique experience in your resume of like 29 homes, like it, because to your point, it wasn't like a tract home, right? Like
Yeah.
all these homes aren't cookie cutter. So they're custom homes with individual homeowners with individual goals. But on the flip side, they're also done kind of all together, right? At more or less at the same time, or certainly similar times, right? And so from your standpoint, then you do have to sort of look across, in this case, 29 homes, right? Or in that case, 29 homes, and you're staging all sorts of materials. You're staging different labor forces, like you have multiple electricians, and can you just kind of say, parse out at a high level, like, and maybe using some examples, just how is that so much different from having a contractor that's maybe used to doing a kitchen remodel, or maybe they built a house here and there? Like that's great, right? Like, but having a licensed contractor is sort of one thing. Having a licensed sort of builder contractor that's worked in these environments, I think is a completely different animal altogether. Well, you're not animals, but a completely different thing, right? And so like, can you kind of unpack like how that's different? And so that way homeowners can sort of also ask these questions to people that they're interviewing for their team of like, hey, like, how would you solve this problem? Like, how are you helping together? And also maybe some guidance on homeowners working together as a community to kind of leverage the economies of scale, of materials and labor, et cetera. Like, can you walk us through some of that stuff?
So, my experience prior to starting my own company, I've worked for production home builders. So I had experience with larger projects. So I just think that past experience really allowed us to execute on that. But so Neil was identifying subcontractors, and so when we go out to bid on a project, we have 2 or 3 preferred subcontractors for each discipline. And so we worked exhaustively with those relationships where we had 2 or 3 different concrete contractors laying out lots, kind of leapfrogging each other, and we created a culture that was really positive and focused on teamwork. And it had its challenges for sure. I mean, Mike, you've talked about that. I think you talked about that in the previous Zoom about demand surge.
Right.
And with the volume of stuff that kicked off, relationships are really important. And we were fortunate that we had done a large volume of stuff even before the fires, where we had really positive relationships with the subcontractors in our community, and even developed new relationships with other subcontractors outside of our community that came in and wanted to work. Like, for example, there was a group that came from St. George, Utah. They were all Mormons. There was, I think, 7 or 8 of them, brothers and cousins, that came out, wanted to help our community. So we ended up helping them find housing, backstopped through interviews and some small jobs first to see how the quality of their work was. And then they became one of our preeminent framing crews. They were great. So, but staging materials, so lumber suppliers, we've typically worked with one lumber supplier, and we're getting deliveries every day. But I think, again, the experience that I had from a production home building background really helped with managing that volume.
Mm.
Did I did I answer your question, Mike, or did I jump around? Like,
Well,
It's sort of like, but even for so if you have 29 homes, right? So say you're a contractor just managing sort of one home versus the contractor managing 29 homes, right? I would imagine that the contractor managing 29 homes, it's not 29 times more complicated than handling one, right? And in fact, there's probably some preferred treatment that you would get because you're locking in multiple jobs for the electrician and the plumber and the lumber supplier. You're sort of higher up the food chain because of just sheer volume and volume. I don't know about volume discounts in a demand surge, but volume priority will probably make a lot of sense, right? And ensuring that you've got work across, hey, we have 29 jobs in this case, right? So an electrician is going to probably look at that kind of a builder a little bit differently than the guy that's just giving me sort of one job and he's trying to piece together sort of his own, I don't want to call it portfolio, but sort of his own work and his own project management, right? It's kind of easier at scale, I would think, across a number of different folks.
it did put us in a position of leverage because of the volume of work. No,
Yeah.
no doubt about it.
well, and besides the volume of work and economy of scale, it's the economy really of time. And if you can put together, several projects in the same, couple block radius or whatever it is, that subcontractor can move, and the general contractor herself, we can move between projects quickly and cover more ground instead of jumping in a truck and driving across town to get to the second, third, fourth, fifth job. That eats up time. And actually in moving equipment and materials, you can move from, a lot easier to move your subcontractor tools and guys across the street, or if you have a delay, you can pull them off one project and throw them on another because it's just a house or two down.
I was going to touch on that. So you'll hear your contractor talk about critical path items, and critical path items for us at the framing stage are windows and doors and trusses. And so Mike, there were a lot of efficiencies in, as Neil just said, taking a framing crew and having, say, 5 houses contiguous on a block, where that framing crew could get to a point, because there's starting and stopping points with the framing crew. So the rough frame is where they basically build the walls, and then you're waiting on your truss delivery. So manufactured trusses are something we can touch on here in a little bit. Once you bring the trusses in, then you get to a point where you need your doors and your windows. So our goal is to schedule those critical path items so we have a seamless process without delay. But because of demand surge, like Milgard is a pretty common window. Like today in our community, if I were to order a Milgard window package, I could probably get them in 5 to 6 weeks. When demand surge hit our community, and Milgard is in, they have a manufacturing warehouse in Fairfield, which is towards Sacramento on Highway 80. We were looking 14 to 16 weeks during the peak fire rebuilds in our community. So you could see that huge delay. It was 3 times the wait time for their manufacturing process. So having the volume of homes and having the opportunity, we were able to keep that framing crew on site because we had multiple opportunities to move them to while we were juggling.
We're at the end of this section. We can continue a little bit, continue more on this. I just want to see if there's other questions as well. And Brad and Neil, I don't know if I cut you off right there. Apologies.
No,
if I
no worries.
I just want to let you all know where we're at.
Yeah. Are there any questions?
Otherwise, I do have just a couple of quick questions here. Just is, we have, by the way, we do have an architect amongst one of our participants who agreed about bringing, on general contractor fairly early. But just on that question, just 2 related questions here. I presume then the first hire is that architect that I'm bringing on. How quickly would you bring on the general contractor? And then you highlighted a number of parties that are, part of this team. To what extent am I, as a homeowner involved with the decision amongst the subcontractors of some of these other parties?
You can have that.
So, let's answer the first question, like how early should you bring a builder on? From my perspective, the earlier the better. You should be one identifying. So in identifying a builder, Mike said it earlier. Trust and compatibility are the two biggest attributes I would think, start interviewing builders and talk to them or research them, look on their website, see what their experiences are. But the earlier the better. I think that builder may even have some contacts with architects or design professionals that they've worked with in the past, that they know design what we call value engineered plans, right? So Neil said it earlier. Some architects design beautiful stuff and they're extremely talented. But sometimes there's not enough consideration into meeting the financial goals or the budget limits, or in this case, the insurance limits, right? You need to have those conversations early on. And a builder would help, again, backstop a preliminary design with an architect. So the earlier the better.
Yeah.
And then in terms of like that sort of hand selecting subs, I mean, largely, I think Todd's like, do I have to go find my own electrician? Do I have to go find my own survey? Do I have to go find my own? Really, Todd's got to find kind of his own architect and builder in a way, right? And certainly
a contract that you sign with a builder, you're basically hiring him, and then the builder brings his own team. So all of the disciplines that Neil referenced, electrician, HVAC, fire sprinkler, sub, roofer, window vendor, plumber, all those will be under the umbrella of the general contractor. You as the homeowner do not need to identify them at all. No.
Cool. Anything else, Todd or Glenn, that you're seeing?
I had one. Forgive me if you guys have touched on this, but you guys, does anyone in the room, but certainly Brad and Neil and Mike, have advice on how best to interview and assess architects? Like what kinds of questions should they be asking themselves, or in a typical interview or vetting process? It seems like they've just got to go word of mouth and Google and see what their friends have done, but is there anything more efficient than that?
I'd actually love to hear it. You said there's an architect on the horn. Can we call them to the
Scott.
that? I'd love to hear how is his name Scott. I'd love to hear Scott answer.
Oh, whoops.
Hi, Scott.
Hi, how you doing?
Hey.
I actually
Welcome.
I have some fire rebuild experience, and right now I'm doing 9 homes in Altadena. I worked in the Woolsey, but I would ask an architect if they have fire rebuild experience, because I've been sitting in on a lot of these Zooms, and a lot of the architects there's so much misinformation going around, and that would be a big concern. And then I really like that comment about trust and compatibility as far as interviewing architects, contractors, anybody on your team, because they become sort of part of your family for a year or two.
Yeah. You're gonna be talking to them for a while.
Yeah, and you need
In my case, I can't even get rid of Brad. I'm still talking to this like 6 years ago, right? No, I'm kidding, but
and there's it's also important to get somebody who has single family experience, because there are a lot of people who really want to help right now. I actually just got a job today because they fired the previous architect who had never done a house before. And
Wow.
and their approach, it was very obvious in their contract of what they were expecting to do in their scope of services and how they wanted to do it, that they didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I think, Scott's talking about is, and I'm sure he'd say the same thing. Look at their gallery, see what they've done. and see if that's compatible to what you want.
Yeah. Yeah, and are
Would
they
you agree, Scott?
renderings or are they actually like real homes, right?
Yeah, because there's a lot of just visual, graphic people haven't actually built things. And then there's also architects they're a one note. They do the same type of architecture.
Right.
Right.
And a lot of these, I mean, I've got 9 people, I've already interviewed them, and they want all different types of architecture.
Right. Yeah, I would say that this environment requires a more practical This isn't right, the whiz bang, hyper modern, rendered, so cool. Look at these floor to ceiling windows. Oh my God, they go below the floor. It's not about that, right? Like these are homes. People have lost their homes. There's a practicality here. There's a trust here. So I totally agree with you. Completely concur.
And budget is really huge. And I
Right.
think it's important. The architect can help determine some of the soft costs up front. Because a lot of these people also, they've never built anything in their careers.
Right.
So, and the contractors can share hard costs and soft costs because we all have that experience. But I've had to discount my rates. I mean, typically architects are doing, 8 to 12%. I have to do, my West Side clients that I had before the fire, they're paying for my practice right now. But Altadena, I'm doing under 5%.
Good for you.
Because I'm able to find draftspeople and students to help out.
That's awesome.
Otherwise, they can't build. A lot of people can't build. So
yeah, 12%'s a little hot.
thank you for letting me chat.
You're a good person, Scott. Like, hey, love to exchange information offline. But well, I mean, like the way Glenn, can I because I like what Scott was talking about budget, and I thought maybe that's a sort of a nice bridge into our sort of third and final piece before we all pass out, and I still need to eat dinner. So from a money standpoint, and talking about, at least in my head, money kind of comes down to 3 basic things, right? So budget, basically what Scott is talking about, like how do you really think about a budget? Accounting, like how do you manage that budget as stuff is happening? And really the money flow, like where's this money coming from, right? Because now we've got multiple parties involved. We're talking about like insurance and mortgages in a lot of cases too, right? So from a budget standpoint, again, kind of pushing back to what we talked about the last time around our fairy tale, I would certainly just sort of look at, to start, A and B combined, like your primary dwelling and any secondary structures that you have, and sort of combine that into your initial budget, right? So like that's sort of where you'd like to hit. There's other coverages in your policy that we pseudo talk about here and there, right? So some folks might have in big caps like extended replacement cost. And that might have some really nice numbers next to it, like 20%, 30%, 50%, which is money that sits on top of that A and B. I'd encourage you to try to not look at that too hard right now, because we are going into a demand surge environment and costs aren't always as predictable today as they are when you're actually going to have to really write checks. And so I'd try to keep your budget confined into that A and B, which is why it's really important to have like Scott and Neil and Brad or their counterparts all together talking about the trade-offs around whatever it may be, roof types, windows, hardening your home, using hardy siding, all the stuff that we're talking about, right? Having that team together early, because you kind of want to drive it towards that A plus B combined if you can. So I would start with that, right? And again, think that extended replacement cost is more, it's there to help you navigate demand surge. It's not there to make a bigger home. So, and I'll talk about it a little bit more, but basically extended replacement cost doesn't mean go from 2,000 square feet to 3,000 square feet. I've got 50% more. That's not what it means, right? It really is there as kind of a parachute stopgap kind of a thing when situations like this happen. And so what we're trying to do is give this community some tools to work together, use the kind of the scale, economies of scale of working together, use those economies of scale with architects and with contractors that then can use that economy of scale for laborers and material supply. That's the way you kind of attack demand surge. And then the extended replacement cost is there as sort of that stopgap to help you with it. So, other things to think about when you're building those budgets. We talked about ordinance law. So that's kind of this little secret sauce. And again, a builder should be able to unlock some of that stuff for you, understanding when that home was built and being able to maybe essentially submit a separate invoice that's bringing your home up to some of these additional codes that Brad and Neil were just kind of walking through. So it's certainly something to ask during that process. Like, hey, my previous home, if you have plans of your previous home, that could be really helpful too, to sort of say like, hey, this is sort of the difference that we need to kind of get to. I would say something like landscaping is another thing that people kind of ask, because I mean, it's all around us, right? That's sort of its own thing as well. That doesn't come out of A and B. You should have your own coverage for landscaping. It's not always on your declarations page, though. It actually is quite a bit in your sorry, it is quite a bit in the larger insurance package. It's usually put together as like $10,000 to $30,000, like something like that. But then there's a limit at a per plant level. So it's usually like $500 a plant. So you can't go get like a 48-inch magnolia tree box and drop it in there, or a big palm tree. You're up to $500 kind of a thing. So, but landscaping is sort of its own coverage. It's treated a little bit separately. So when you're building your budget, you can kind of think of that. But I would say that when you dive into that budget, like really like larger homes, I really want to emphasize that. Sorry, really quick, my dog. Yeah. Sorry, I've got two dogs. One had surgery yesterday. But when you're building those budgets, like really think through, when we're talking about your homeowner's goals, one of the goals, really try to stay away from, I want a much bigger house. So like if you had a 2,000 square foot house, try to get as close to 2,000 square feet as you can on your rebuild. If you start going into 3,000 square feet, your insurance company, their job is to give you money to replace your 2,000 square foot house. Their job is not, and their goal is not to make sure that you have a better life and give you a 3,000 square foot house. That is not where they're going to be doing this. So you really want to be careful. You can get yourself into a pretty heavy cash out situation, where that other 1,000 square feet is going to be on you. And you're going to have to then negotiate percentages on basically everything, like your linear feet of your siding, linear feet of gutters, your squares of your roof, your square feet of flooring. So you really kind of want to get as close to the original sort of, doesn't necessarily have to be the same footprint per se, but just 2,000 square feet, 2,000 square feet, right? So try to keep it there if you can. That said, at a planning or a county level, I did have a good conversation with some of the county folks a month or two ago. They are being flexible on, if you're on the Palisade side, like they are being pretty flexible in terms of when they're going to kick you to Coastal Commission. So they are allowing a 10% addition to your main square footage. They are allowing you to build an ADU in addition. So that's nice. So that means, and what that means is that you don't have to then go through the Coastal Commission thing and being lost in that wilderness for a year. So that's a good win from a county standpoint that has nothing to do with the budget standpoint. So if you want to build an ADU and you didn't have one before, that's fine. Just understand that that's a cash out scenario. Your insurance company is not going to give you money to build an ADU. It's just not going to work that way. So just kind of think through that. The way budgets, the thing to think through on budgets is the estimates and the bids. And I think it's important to kind of talk about different types of estimates, different types of bids that you can see from different contractors. There's two primary ones, and that the guys are gonna they can kind of give you some color onto why you would want to choose one or the other over the other. But in short, you have something called a fixed fee or a fixed bid estimate. And what that means is that more or less everything, it's used a lot in developments and tract homes. And Brad's previous career, he probably has a ton of experience kind of going through these things, right? And that's more or less where everything is kind of prescribed ahead of time. And the homeowner really needs to understand, hey, there's maybe, I don't know, 80 or $80 a foot, linear foot for cabinets. And there's an assumption behind that $80 a linear foot for cabinets that says, oh, okay, well, it's got a shaker door and it's a partial overlay and a couple other things. And that might sound like Greek, like what the hell is a shaker door and what is partial overlay and what does that mean? It's important as a homeowner to understand, if that's in there, that you're kind of signing up for, this is a shaker door and partial overlay. Because if you then go through the process, and now we're 2 months from now, and you you start looking at cabinets and you start shopping for cabinets, you're like, oh, a shaker door is just that really simple door with the the single panel and the trim around it. I wanted something more ornate, or I wanted glass panels or some wire mesh panel. Like that's not included. That's a change order. A partial overlay is when the door is like assembled to the front of the frame of a cabinet. It's a relatively inexpensive way to assemble because there's a lot of tolerance available. But a lot of folks, when they get to the showroom, they kind of want the door sort of inset. It's called basically it's in line with the face frame, like a European inset. That's actually more expensive, and so it's one of these things where fixed fee may and fixed bid might sound really good on the surface because, hey, this is my budget and I feel really strong about it. But it does require a homeowner to understand either understand everything that's going on in there, or number two, to sort of say, I trust in the process and I'm not going to derail this thing because I want different cabinets 3 months from now. So
If I can add in there, Mike, something that may help people understand is typically in a fixed fee budget, all of what we refer to as the homeowner selections are standardized. That's all I wanted to add.
yeah, no, it's fine. So
Very little options, very standardized. So it's not a customized process.
Yeah, I
Right.
mean, the only other way, typically, if it is customized, you'd hire an interior decorator or designer, and they've picked out every item in the house, sourced it, priced it, and I mean, TP holders to every cabinet knob, actually have the slabs on hold at the tile store, all the tiles, the grout. I mean, absolutely every detail has been selected, sourced, and priced. And then that is compiled into this massive contract. And what we found in our home rebuilds of fire rebuilds, people just don't have that bandwidth.
Yeah.
That is so far down the road, they can't even wrap their head around that. So basically what we typically do is we build out a budget and say, okay, here's, $20,000 for plumbing trims in your budget for the sinks, the faucets, the toilets, and we give you a time frame. Hey, those items need to be picked by this time so we can have them installed on a timely fashion.
So as opposed to fixed fee standardized selections, we provide budget allowances for customized selections.
Right. So basically then going down the cost plus road, right, is kind of where you're headed, which is, and so for the folks understand, like the sort of the second major estimate type that you're coming across, it's cost plus, which is essentially cost meaning the cost of the labor and materials that these guys are getting together for you, right? So the cost of the electricians and all the outlets and the framers and the lumber and everything else, right? And then adding plus, and the plus on top is usually 10 and 10 is the model. I'm pretty sure that's kind of what Ready goes with usually, right? So 10 and 10 is 10% for administration fees, so like literally their job of what they're doing all the time, and then 10% profit because they're not a .org. I mean, this is free, but overall, right? Their day job, they do need to make some money for their own families, right?
And,
So
that was established by like the insurance industry standard. Yeah.
So that's what cost plus means, and that's what 10 and 10 means. So everybody knows is that's the 10 and 10. So what that does though is that then the homeowner is obviously responsible for the cost and everything. Brad and Neil or your builder is going to provide a budget, but then from a billing standpoint and from an invoicing standpoint, it gives you a lot more flexibility throughout the process, where these guys are going to then say, okay, we're going to, I mean, you guys can walk through your process, right? But hey, the plumbing fixture selections are due because, hey, we've got, this is what we already have built in. Obviously, you guys are going to purchase it, the plumbing fixtures, or purchase the window packages, that type of a thing. But it then gives the homeowner the advantage of if they do a mill guard, and maybe initially the budget was a single hung, and they really want to do the double hung for whatever reason, now you can kind of do the double hung. So it just provides some flexibility from an invoicing standpoint, but also then allows you the budgeting standpoint. So that's from like a budget piece and sort of what the bid is. There's an accounting piece, so sort of like the sibling documents to your estimate and your bid are invoices and receipts. And we've all dealt with invoices and receipts before, but in this environment, it's really important because of the next piece I'm going to talk about around money flow, but it's really important to be very organized about this stuff. You're going to end up having to track expenses. It's one of the things that a public adjuster does, by the way. We talked about public adjusters in the last session, but a PA is actually going to manage these things for you. But without a PA, you don't necessarily need QuickBooks per se, but you certainly do need to have a system of accounting because you're going to want to understand what insurance has already paid you, and you're going to want to understand what invoices that are outstanding for the contractor and what you have to owe them, what money you've already paid. And and the contractor is obviously one piece. There's other aspects to your rebuild, like buying personal property, replacing personal property, things of that nature. So you're going to want to have a system. And back in the day, I used Google Sheets, just as an FYI. 6 months from now, we're going to have Loti. So this is like sort of a soft pitch, but this is one of the things that Loti actually will do for you. So call that in about 6 months. But in the meantime, in the meantime, make sure you're keeping track of your invoices and receipts. Like you are going to have to be kind of mini accountants in this. And this is also where it's really important, again, for your contractor and your architect to have worked in these environments before so they can properly package some of these invoices. It's not just like, hey, here's September's invoice. There's nuances to it. There's invoices around, hey, this is for A, this is for B, here's your ordinance coverage for September. So that way they can all nest in really nicely for yourself, and your accounting can actually be as seamless as it is. But you're not going to get away from it. You're going to have to track numbers, invoices, receipts, and like I said, I would use Sheets and Google Drive until Loti's ready to go.
Mike, and if I can interject real quick, like he's saying, being organized and methodical of this, that's a big part of picking your contractor. I mean,
Yeah.
you can be like, hey, we've got a guy. He remodeled our bathroom and our kitchen. He did a great job. And you'll have those guys jump into this environment and try to build these ground up fire rebuilds. And it's a totally different animal. They don't have the office staff to produce these reports. They don't have, and I can tell from me and Brad, when we're building these houses 30 days at a time, we're the bank, we're floating that cash flow. You have to have financial resources to pay the bills to the subcontractors, to the material suppliers, have the credit to have the material suppliers, front you the materials. And that takes a lot of capital and a lot of years doing it and having those resources and those relationships. So when you're looking for a builder, make sure he's somebody that builds homes from the ground up. You're not looking for a remodel builder because that's not what they do. That's, make sure that they've actually, and if they've worked in the fire realm, that even not much better. But guys ask me all the time, what does it take to be a general contractor? Young guys, and I'm like, a lot of money. It takes a lot of money to backstop your business. So you can pay your bills and pay your suppliers until that bank or the insurance company pays you.
So we did see some smaller builders in our community, their projects get stalled out where for whatever reason cash flow becomes an issue. Maybe the insurance company was slow getting the money to his client.
Maybe.
Possibly, maybe.
Very standard operating.
And so the contractor's saying, well, I can't proceed until I get paid. So there were times where work could have happened, but it got stalled out because, subcontractors weren't paid. They're not going to continue work until they get paid. And it's an unfortunate circumstance when you have a fire survivor who's anxious and there's a schedule and things are getting delayed. It's really unfortunate circumstance.
Yeah, and say sort of kind of Sorry, Glenn, you were going to say something?
Well, why don't you finish your thought? Because I think it would be good to hear the general economics of the total cost. And also, I think it would be good for the audience to hear, I think generally whether you've done a kitchen or a bathroom, which is different than rebuilding a 2,000 square foot home or whatever, what is the range of uncertainty that would cause, change orders or meaningful changes to the economics? So there's a lot there, but let's come back to what Mike wanted to say. But I think the general economics, I know that Scott said, 8 to 12% for the architect. So there's obviously just materials, which is what it is, and then there's builders and all the
Yeah, and
labor.
I would say so. The two things I wanted to kind of just build off of where Brad and Neil were going were, and sort of just kind of closing up on accounting really quickly, is really understanding if you're going to manage your own project, right? Really, you want to understand your insurance policy and how that is packaged together. I just want to again remind you, there's tons of content at loti.com that is free. Go back and rewatch our previous video around the fairy tale to understand coverages. We've got a book on understanding insurance on Amazon, like any of that stuff, like because that's how insurance companies are going to think, and you want to basically package all these invoices accordingly against those coverages. So it's important. The second thing that Brad and Neil were then talking about was around money flow, and there's a lot to money flow. And I've jokingly said that insurance companies may hold back on payment. And sometimes that's purposeful, honestly, as a negotiating tactic. Other times there's a lot of players in this, right? So if you have a mortgage, then you probably understand that they have some of your money in escrow, right? So like if a insurance company has said, oh, I'm going to pay $1 million of your A and B, probably don't have a check for $1 million right now, right? There's monies being held in escrow if you have a mortgage, in that bank account. And they will release some of that money for you to get started and actually get the project going and kind of get Neil and Brad going and Scott going and that type of those groups going. But remember then that maybe Scott is now have to pay his subs net 30, right? Neil and Brad need to pay their subs net 30. So they've got bills coming in from electricians and surveyors. And so they're getting you their invoice. Now you're going to get that invoice over to your bank and your insurance. And as you're kind of going through stuff, maybe money flow is okay for the time being. The way the bank is going to essentially release funds is at major checkpoints throughout the construction process. So similar to a construction loan has, I mean, it used to have like 9 checkpoints or 9 gates, maybe it has 12, but whatever it is, each bank's can be a little bit different. But basically they kind of piggyback off of an inspection. So when the guys were talking about the process early on around, hey, your foundation is poured. Okay, well, you're going to get even before you get the foundation poured, you're going to get an inspection to make sure that it's actually formed correctly. It's called form. So that it's formed correctly, right? Then the same thing is going to happen when you get framed. And is it framed correctly? Is your home waterproofed? Are your windows installed? Is your electrician, the electrical, is it roughed in correctly? Same thing with plumbing. There's a series of inspections that happen. Your bank is also then, when that inspector comes out from the county, your bank is going to send out an inspector, hopefully within a few days. After inspector number 1 signs off on your drywall, then bank is going to send out their inspector and say, yes, okay, this inspection is now signed off, and that will then release some money. And it's not always a perfect one-to-one relationship type of a thing. That's why we definitely encourage you to talk to your bank and keep your insurance company informed. Because at the same time, right, as we said, that some of that money has been released, but at some point we might want to begin accessing that extended replacement cost. And so if your bank has paid out $1 million for A and B, your insurance has paid out $1 million for A and B, and that bucket now gets lower and lower as you're paying for electricians and everything else to the process, you're going to want to be teeing up your insurance company that, hey, demand surges happen. This thing doesn't cost $1 million anymore. This is going to cost 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. And in order to do that, that's how you're going to be accessing that extended replacement cost and trying to get ahead of that conversation with the invoices and receipts. And what happens is exactly what Neil and Brad are talking about, right? Where the system can get clogged up. It can be done 2 different ways. It can get clogged up where those guys are going to have to carry a lot of cash to be able to pay their own subs, and they're left holding the bag for a little bit until insurance pays. If an insurance company is working nicely, then they're going to work together with you in order to try to make sure that the contractor is paid, right? But there's certainly
So Mike, big picture, sorry to interrupt you.
go for it.
What Mike's saying in summary is, in a lot of cases, there's three sources of money for the project. The
Right.
homeowner has some money. Insurance is still sitting on some money, and if there is a lien holder on the mortgage company is holding on some money. So very important that the builder is well versed in how to communicate with all three of those people so their invoices get paid. So most importantly, the project proceeds and can continue.
There you go. Right. It's like that money flow. It's basically a waterfall for is essentially how that money flow happens. And for folks that are well versed in it, they can kind of help you navigate it. And that's why. Public adjusters know how to navigate that as well. They're all talking the same language. You're doing it yourself, then just understand that you're going to have to learn some basic kind of accounting and understand where that money is. You want to keep track of, hey, the bank has this amount. I should be getting this amount under insurance. This is how much cash I've either paid out. And you want to make sure that you're really starting from $1, right? So you're not going to be able to go to an insurance company if they've already paid you the $1 million and then you've burned through $1 million and then you go up there and say, hey, I need my extended replacement cost now. I need another 100 grand. It doesn't work that way. You actually have to prove and show the whole case of, I have now spent the $1 million. Here's every invoice, every receipt. This is what I've been paid. This is all the inspections, et cetera. So then they can then release more money. And a lot of the reasons why that release doesn't happen as quickly as people would like it to is because people aren't organized. They don't realize that they need to be planning ahead for that. There are some nefarious business practices and on the insurance side where they use that time aspect to their advantage. To kind of this becomes a business negotiation in some cases, and they will use that to their advantage. Time is a, I don't know, it's a negotiation tactic for lack of a better term. So just be aware that that's at a high level. That's sort of like the money flow. I just really wanted to capture that you've got a budget, and those are kind of the documents and tools to build a budget. Accounting, invoices and receipts being super, super organized, and then understanding your money flow of these different sources where they are, and that folks don't forget, like Brad and they've got to pay their guys too, right? So there's a lot of folks involved in it. It does get pretty complicated in these scenarios. So
we're about 8:10 now. We do have one question here, and then maybe just see if there's anything final to let everyone kind of wrap up. But just this one question is just kind of captures everything here in terms of the homeowners' time. How should they look at allocating their time to these various aspects of the project? It's a very kind of a big question, but it kind of touches each of these sections that we've talked about tonight.
So I mean, as a fellow survivor, it's a lot of work, and I mean that's honestly all cards on the table. That's why I built Loti as a business, because there's a lot of work here, and it is deep into the pool across a whole bunch of different skills. And that's things like accounting, understanding construction a bit so you can make decisions because it is your home, right? And this we're just talking about one aspect. Remember last time we talked about personal property, inventory, and things like that, and managing your insurance and your bank. You can't really, I'd rather not sugarcoat it too much. There's a lot of work in front of you. There really is. Is it a full-time job? I mean, it's not necessarily a full-time job, but it's awfully close. I mean, you are spending 15, 20 hours a week on a lot of this kind of stuff because the more organized you are, I guess, the less time you're spending, but there's a lot of decisions coming your way, and just a ton of them. And I think like having a team, going back to that great quote that Brad had around trust, like having the team around you that you trust, so you don't feel obligated that you have to be the smartest person in the room on every decision. You need to have a knowledge. You need to be understanding some of the decisions that you're making, but surrounding yourself with a team that can help you through that quickly is so important, right? So having an architect like Scott, who clearly looks at very trust. I mean, I'm just meeting the guy, right? But I mean, dude's obviously a pretty trustworthy guy. Like I'd be calling him tomorrow and saying like, hey, like walk me through. You've got 9. Do you have capacity? Just like understanding like folks that they're there that you can trust because you're not gonna be able to make everything, but it is gonna or make every decision. But there is a lot of work. I don't want to think that this is something that dude, this is just a couple hours a week, right? You're gonna get called into a lot of different stuff. There's gonna be questions. There just always are. It is building a home. And we're only talking about one piece of it tonight, right? There's also your personal property, which we can get into in further detail, replacing that personal property. There's just a lot of stuff, man. And it sucks. And it like the whole thing sucks. It's horrible. But like I said, that's why I'm building this company. That's why there is a ton of content out there that you can read at your leisure. And that is why we're building a system to help you through it. At the moment, I really think it's best team, Google Sheets, Google Drive, roll up your sleeves and do the best you can. And really having a team around you that you can trust. Really. And I would throw a public adjuster in there because like if you have a full-time job, this is if you're already working 40 or 50 hours a week, I mean, this is like basically back in, I don't know, investment banking where now you're working 70 hours a week. It is like that. This is like a tech job now or whatever our backgrounds were back in the day. That's what this is you're going to come home at night at 6 o'clock, roll up the sleeves because you got some more stuff you've got to deal with and your weekends are shot. Especially then when you also have to go shopping for more personal property, you got to get a couch and you've got to get mattresses and everything else, right? And so just I would be prepared for that kind of stuff. There's a lot coming your way.
Yeah, and if I can interject, I mean, putting together the right team is gonna mitigate some of that for you.
Some of it for sure.
Yeah, and what I would say is, you know, in the beginning, in the the design of the house, a lot of it's going to be working with the architect, and then a lot of your time is going to be working with the insurance company or a PA to maximize your insurance policy. But then during the build, what we like to do is we like to set points where we want you to come out and walk the project and see where it's at and see if there's anything that you want to change. But on the flip side of that, and we've had this where we've had clients that obsess over the project and they're there every day and they're eating their lunch and they're sitting behind the guys while they're working.
Why are you talking about me like that? What are you doing?
I'm not talking about you. I'm actually talking about a female we had that the guy's wife would sneak into the house and scare the workers while they were working. But and that can be counterproductive where they're coming in every weekend with their wife or their significant other and they're making changes. And on Monday, you're getting this phone calls of, hey, we want to make these changes, or we want to make that change, and it stalls the project. So you got to have some balance. Work with the team, trust your team, but don't let this take over your life. Still live your life, but like Mike was saying, it's a lot of work. It is a lot of work, but
I would
the
say
better
that
team you have, the easier it's going to be on you.
yeah, hiring the right team, and also that there are folks you can hire for different aspects, right? Like you're not hiring a contractor to build your house. Duh. Hiring an architect to design the house, right? I do think hiring a PA to manage insurance. I don't want to deal with insurance all the time
Right.
because you also are gonna there are some things that are actually kind of fun down the process, right? It's like, hey, we get to design a new living room. Like what is where to the couch? Let's go to Crate and Barrel and let's pick out our new housewares. You get all new kitchen stuff everywhere, right? Like that's like fun but it also is time too, right? And so like planning for those trips of having that I just think like all of that is kind of this is replacing all your clothing and all those things that happen. Those are things that you can't hire somebody to go replace your clothing. I mean, I guess maybe somebody in this call is a personal shopper, but generally speaking, right? Those are things you have to do yourself. So I try to outsource as much as I can to the folks that I trust and then focus on things because I have a day job and focus on the things that only I can do or only my wife and I can do together kind of a thing. That's the way I'd look at it. Long-winded answer, Todd. Sorry.
Well, thank you. Very helpful. Well, we're at 8:15. I'm mindful of
Yeah.
there's dinners to be had.
Yes, great. Thank you so much, Brad and Neil and Mike and Todd. And if you guys have any other questions at all, the hub document, which has that bit.ly link to LA Fires Harvard Help, is our ongoing hub of recordings and transcripts. I do believe it's open for comments and we'll be listening. So if you have questions and want to follow up, that just go to that document. You can comment in and say, hey, Mike mentioned this or that, or do you have a link to this or that? And we can keep the conversation going that way. Great big thanks again to Brad and Neil and Mike and Todd. And if there's not anything else, I think we'll wrap for tonight. And thanks so much.
Yeah, we just want to say we appreciate the opportunity to talk to you guys, and we will be down in LA working. We have a private cleanup. We'll be down there in a couple weeks getting started on for a client. So if you have any questions about the process, we are familiar with the fire rebuild process in LA. Like I said, we will be down there working soon. So anything or any questions or comments or concerns, reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Our pleasure. Have a good evening.
Have a great
Thanks,
evening.
guys. Have a great one.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Pleasure.